Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our very first Fireside Chat for 2022. My name is Rizana. I am the People, Partners, and Events Manager for Women in Tech South Africa. Please follow our social media pages to find out more about what we do to reach our goal of empowering 5 million women and girls by the year 2030. We are a nonprofit organization, and our key focus areas are education, entrepreneurship, social inclusion, and science and innovation. Our social media manager, Natasha, will be posting all of our links in the chat. So please go check out the projects that we have completed thus far. A project that we are immensely proud of is opening an IT learning center in Philippi, Cape Town. So what this means is that the students and children in and around the Philippi township will have access to an IT learning center, access to computers and tutors who can help them with their homework and get them excited about science and technology. We also donated some computers to a school in Philippi called Talfala Primary. So please go and check out our social media pages. Um, that Natasha will post. And Natasha is our social media manager. She's part of our youth team and she's from UKZN. She's a current and honest student. And the incredible thing is that our youth team is full with UKZN alum. And this also includes our guest today, Vedantha Singh. Trained as a multidisciplinary medical scientist, Vedanta has a master's in medical sciences, specializing in HIV vaccine development. Following this, Vedanta worked in public health as part of a team investigating the use of mobile health interventions for the early diagnosis of cancer amongst women in Khayelitsha. Her current work and focus of her PhD is the implementation of AI in healthcare. Specifically, her work investigates the equitable and ethical use of this technology to enhance Africa's response to the growing healthcare burden. During 2020, Vedanta developed the SA policy guidelines for the use of AI in healthcare. She is the founder of Braintree Ventures, a company that links startups with healthcare professionals interested in innovation and the delivery of last mile digital technologies. Vedanta is also my personal role model and an all round superwoman. Welcome, Vedanta. How are you today? How are you feeling?
Thanks, Rosanna. I am feeling incredibly empowered by just that introduction, and I'm very privileged to be here, invited by a woman in Tech South Africa. And I'm also incredibly honored to be sharing this platform with you today. And you don't know it, but I draw a ton of inspiration from you as well. So I think it's more of a mutual relationship.
Thank you so much, Vedanta. I'm so honored to be able to do this with you. So, Vedanta, tell us more about you. From little girl to inspiring woman making waves in a field, what was life like growing up, and how did you get to where you are today?
Okay. So young Vedantha was incredibly curious, almost to a point where it became difficult for my parents to take me anywhere. I was always asking questions, and I surrounded myself with adults and older cousins who were willing to explain things to me. It got to a point where I was being specifically unrelenting one day, and a cousin of mine decided to distract me by teaching me the chemical formula of water, of all things. And we spent the entire afternoon discussing chemistry. And it was there where I was hooked. I realized that all that curiosity and all that energy came from the desire that I had to learn about the phenomenon I was observing around me. And it was years later, after my parents encouraged me by buying me, microscopes and lab coats as gifts, taking me to museums and aquariums and nature reserves. It was after a while I realized I wanted to become a scientist. And I started to look into biology. I pursued an undergraduate in biomedical science, and eventually graduated with a master's in vaccinology. And it was a very interesting time for me when I studied HIV vaccines and the development of immune responses to vaccines. In 2012, I was lucky enough to present my work at an international conference, and I was so impressed with the findings. I stayed behind to speak with all of the speakers, and one of the speakers was Anthony Fauci, in fact. And so I got to meet him, and he was the one who I think spoke to me about the immense opportunity we have as African scholars to contribute to the fight against Africa's growing health burden. And it was there that I realized I needed to swap lanes a little bit. And I started studying more public health related projects. And I did the mobile health intervention program with the University of Cape Town, which linked hundreds of women in Khayelitsha to their doctors and to their oncologists using their cell phones. I think that was the first time really saw the power of technology firsthand, and the role that it could potentially play in empowering women to take control of their own health. And I basically used that as a catalyst to find my own PhD project. And that's where I found the GSB, the Graduate School of Business. I've learned about social impact investment and finding sustainable solutions for healthcare and other grand challenges. But that is where I am now, and that is how you find me a PhD student working towards this goal of looking at AI in healthcare.
Wow, Vedanta, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's so important for us as the future parents to acknowledge how much children take in and how much we can impact them and their interests and where they, what they ultimately become in the future. Treat them as adults and allow them
Yeah,
to
exactly.
experience
Definitely.
it. Yeah. So, Vedanta, you have done and accomplished so many impactful things, but what I'm most interested in hearing about is the AI ethics. AI is sort of a buzzword in the tech field. What is it, and why is AI ethics so important?
Good question. Give me 3 years. No, I'm kidding. AI is very tricky to define, especially with the way it's being used in the mainstream media. It's almost a catch-all phrase or a buzzword, as you rightfully pointed out. I mean, it's the first time AI or artificial intelligence was described was in the 50s by a really prominent researcher in computer science, Alan Turing. And he looked at machines that were, in his words, behaving or showing intelligent behavior, rather. And since then, the term has evolved, but the general understanding is that artificial intelligence is a combination of various technologies, such as neural networks and machine learning and big data, even, that all contribute into a system that is able to perceive, interpret, understand, and eventually continuously learn from data to perform tasks that are independent from human intervention. So they're able to make decisions on their own, in essence. Now, because of this autonomy that comes with artificial intelligence and decision making, the internal mechanisms of how these systems come to decisions is poorly understood, and it's very difficult to trace. So this is why we say there's this lack of interpretability of artificial intelligence systems. Whether it's in the healthcare or whether it's in any other sector, it poses quite a difficult conundrum for people to working with this technology. In addition to that, the foundation of all AI systems is data, and data comes from human beings, and human beings are contaminated. I will, if I would be so bold as to use that word, with a host of biases, whether they're cognitive biases or otherwise. And those inherent biases are often translated into the data that we use to train AI systems. Now, if the data is contaminated with biases, the AI systems are going to come to inaccurate or even biased decisions. So that's one area of it. And one can say that the design of the AI system really determines the success of that system or whether that system is going to further widen the discrimination in society. The second concern is the major shift of the working functions of people now that automation and AI has come into the fore. And lots of hype has been circulating that AI or automation is going to replace the existing workforce.
Yeah.
And in that case, we will be using AI to create a dystopia of economic segregation rather than using AI as a tool to make a better, easier world to live in. And both the UNESCO policy and the European Union policy calls for AI systems to augment or supplement human decision making and not completely replace the workforce. Therefore, you could also say that the implementation of AI systems will also determine whether the technology is successful or whether it fails. And so these two aspects, the design of the system and the implementation of the AI system, is where AI ethics comes into play. And roughly, AI ethics is a set of guidelines that advise on the design and the implementation of artificial intelligence in various sectors. Now, over the past few years, you would know, Rosanna, that the field of AI has advanced faster than ever before with the introduction of things like big data and cloud computing. AI is used for a wide array of applications that very few people have the ability to regulate and monitor. However, even though the technology has advanced, AI is still susceptible to a host of errors and biases. And when it's developed with malicious intent or trained with biased data sets, it has an enormous potential to cause devastation in society and to be weaponized in ways that will threaten public safety, security, the economy, equity, and overall the quality of life. And it was these reasons that I found AI ethics to be important and something we should be studying. Thanks.
Thank you for that great explanation, Vedant. And I'm so glad that South Africa is getting involved with AI ethics. So the first time that I became aware of AI ethics is I was watching Coded Bias. It's a Netflix documentary. Have you seen it? It's so good. So it
Yeah.
follows, you should watch it, and
Yeah.
everyone else watching as well, please go and watch this documentary. So it follows this student who the AI facial recognition system, she's a student of color, and it did not recognize her face as a human face until she put a white mask on. um, so tell me, Vedanta, in South Africa, what AI technologies are we currently using that your policy is related to, and just tell us a little bit more about the policy guidelines.
Sure. So we are in a situation in South Africa right now where we have the potential to create the world in which we want AI to come into, because AI has not been as widespread in South Africa as it has been in Europe or the US. So right now we are creating a safety net for the occasion which AI is being used in healthcare widely. For now, we use AI specifically for finance, fintech, consumer related data analysis. We haven't really started using it for healthcare. And there's a lot of reasons for that, including the infrastructure issues. A vast majority of our health data is still in paper form in this country. So it's a long time before we can truly say that we are using AI in the healthcare sector. But the policy is there to bring together policies from the international bodies, as I mentioned, the UNESCO policy, the United Nations policy, and the European Union policy, bring those together and adapt it to the context that we find ourselves in South Africa. It's incredibly unique, very different from what these policies in the North were developed for. So the idea was to have a starting point for which we could then build on when these technologies begin to be widespread in the country.
Right. I'm so proud that we are actually getting prepared, because I think before humans, well, we are growing very fast, technology is growing very fast, but we need to, as we go into the fourth industrial revolution, we need to protect our own humanity and our fellow human beings. That comes first.
Exactly.
So thank you for sharing all of that, Vedanta. Another topic that I'd really love to talk about is, how is your PhD journey going? I always have students coming to me and asking advice, like, should I do postgrad? Should I first go work? Is it worth it to, go straight from undergrad, finish PhD and then find a job. What is your advice? And what advice do you wish someone gave you when you started out?
Okay. Um, I would say it takes a very special type of drive to um, spend 12 years in school and then spend another 10 to 12 years in
Right.
postgrad to get a
Yeah.
PhD. So I would say only do it if you are like me and you are a curious kid who wanted to learn about absolutely everything. And the PhD is a very lonely journey. So you are the one driving it, you are the one determining how the progress is going. And therefore, I think it takes more than just passion, but it takes a lot of sacrifice. You're going to be in the process and you're going to be watching your friends, go into industry and get jobs and expand their careers in that light. So it takes somebody a little bit of sacrifice, a few years of your life to dedicate to this pursuit of your PhD. And I would advise students to first at least work for a year to 3 years in industry to get an idea of the real world. Because it's no point doing a PhD if you haven't experienced what the grand challenges are in
Yeah.
the actual working world. So, my advice is always to take at least 3 years to get to know the working world, to get to know how the world functions before you decide to pursue a PhD. And then I would say to definitely get involved in a master's project first and make sure that master's project has a really huge research component. So you should try and aim for master's projects with full dissertations so you get an understanding of what it's like to conduct your own research and then to compile that research into basically a manuscript, a book. And then how my PhD is going, like I said, it is up to you as the PhD student to drive your work and to push yourself. So the work is going well. It could be going faster. But then I realized that everything takes time and you need to be patient. So I do believe it'll get there eventually.
Definitely, you will get there. And I'm so proud of you, Vedanta. So,
Thank you.
Vedanta, can you also tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing? So, you're working with UCT, am I correct?
That's
So,
correct,
what's your
yes.
current role? What do you do during the day? What does a day in the life of Vedanta look like?
Okay, so as a child, I was hoping to avoid sitting in front of a computer the entire day, which is why I became a scientist in the first place. But as it stands, most of my work is doing research at the GSB. I'm the research manager there, and we manage around 50 to 60 projects that range from social innovation to value based leadership and even developmental finance. So there's quite a number of projects on the go, and my job is to make sure that they're all running smoothly and that reports have been placed in the right boxes, etc. And so the day in my life is a lot of emails and a lot of communication, a lot of talking people of ledgers in some cases, talking people to force people into doing work in some instances. But it definitely is rewarding in the sense that I get exposed to such a wide variety of interesting cutting edge research that's happening. And it inspires you, it motivates you, but it also humbles you. And that's really, really important in any journey, I think.
Very interesting. Thank you, Vedanta. So, in the comments, we have Rochelle Naidu, and she is commenting on your first answer about little Vedanta growing up. She says, so true. Parents play such a vital role in supporting and influencing our interests from a young age. I think you both are setting a great example for future parents.
Yeah,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, we're getting some good comments. Jugi Singh says, hearing you live is very interesting.
That's a good
Okay,
parent.
yeah. Another question is we would love to know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on the AI field and how it can benefit us as a society?
That is in fact the key reason why I decided to immerse myself in this field.
Yes.
I think that above all of the biases and the dystopian futures that I was talking about earlier, I think above it all is a tool that humans can use to make their lives better. I feel the AI field, and I can only speak about the use of AI in the health sector. I
Yeah.
feel that the recent COVID pandemic and the um, marginalizing of Africa and Africa's health needs has shown us that conventional methods alone do not hold up in modern times, and it certainly will not hold up in the future. So I think I see the field as a huge mechanism for us to leapfrog into a position where we are self sustainable as a continent, where we can, in fact, take care of the needs of our continent, specifically the health needs, because I've seen technology as simple as a mobile telephone. And I've seen how empowering that can be in the hands of a person who is desperate for healthcare. I think AI is a tool for us to really leapfrog and make sure that we take care of ourselves going forward.
We need more Vedanta Singhs in this world. You know,
There's a
sure,
few people in history.
we're going about our everyday lives, but how many of us actually ask, how are we benefiting society? What extra things are we doing? That's very important.
Mhm.
Yeah, Ken Davidian says the PhD journey is lonely, but we want to be there when you need support. And some encouraging
Thank you,
words.
Ken. Thank you, Ken.
So, Vedanta, when you started your journey as a scientist in your studies, I bet you never thought that you would ever make this slight pivot into technology and AI, right? So, we have a lot of followers who are not in the technology space, but they would like to pivot. Any advice on how to go about, changing? You've studied something, but now you're interested in something else. You want to make that turn.
Yeah.
Any advice on that?
Yeah, I think I can provide some insight based on my experience. We live in a really interesting world where we have information overload, but we can use that to our advantage. There's a number of freely available course material that you can access on various aspects of data science, on programming, if you want to get really technical. So, my advice would be to make use of that information and enroll for a seminar that in a completely different field that you are working in. And I think the key thing is be comfortable with being uncomfortable in a field. It's
Yeah.
okay if you don't know everything there is to know, if you haven't mastered that field yet, but it's important to expose yourself to that and be brave enough to put yourself through a situation where you have to go through the difficult growing pains of learning something completely new to you. The other advice I would say is to reach out to people on LinkedIn, on social media that you've identified as someone who has a profile that you one day aspire to have as well. I would say reach out, meet with people as much as you can, albeit virtually during COVID, and I guess be proactive, be brave, and be proactive. That's the take-home message from me.
Yeah, excellent advice. Thank you, Vedanta. Yeah, so Vedanta, what are your future plans?
Um, So I think the moment I'm done with my PhD, I would like to take a break with my family, but definitely contribute to the work that I've been working on during the PhD, and that is setting up the first clinical trials in Africa in which artificial intelligence will be used to help with the diagnosis of glaucoma and diabetes. So I'd really like to set up those clinical trials and make that the foundation for which the use of AI becomes a priority on the continent, and we are able to collaborate with our African neighbors as well as our international, countries to come together to develop a lasting clinical trial network for AI in healthcare on the continent. I also want to be part of something that allows me to leave behind a group of people who we are able to mentor and take up the baton of this sort of work before we leave, and I
Yeah.
think organizations like the Women in Technology is something that I would really love to get involved in, so that we could help mentor those who are coming in, coming into the next generation.
Yeah, exciting. So, our global team is currently busy with our mentor and mentee applications. So, if you did apply, you should be hearing from us soon. And also, for those of you that don't know, a fireside chat is supposed to be interactive. You're supposed to leave a fireside chat gaining relevant knowledge. So, please ask as many questions as you'd like. And I'm sure Vedanta is willing to answer all of them. Vedanta, also, would you mind telling us a bit about Braintree?
About Braintree. Okay, so Braintree is this fledgling idea that I had sitting around a fireside, funny enough, thinking about how we are going to bridge this gap between the excellent healthcare professionals we have in this country and AI, which is the scary new technology that some of them don't even want to engage with at this stage. And so Braintree is a company that helps healthcare practitioners link up with developers and software engineers who can help develop tools that will make these healthcare professionals access information and deliver the best healthcare possible to their patients. So we have a number of healthcare practitioners that come in with their problems and with their great ideas, and we link them with the best possible software engineers, all local, all South African, and together they come up with novel solutions. We take the idea and we sort of help them develop a startup around it. And the idea with that is hopefully we have homegrown talent for homegrown problems in the future. And so that's what the idea of Braintree is. How it will evolve in the next couple of years is completely out of my radar right now. But I'm hoping that it is something that bridges the gap between medical professionals and software engineers.
That's amazing. Please keep us updated. And if you don't mind, we'll be following you and your journey. And hopefully, when Braintree takes off, we'll have another fireside chat.
I think that would be a great idea. And to anyone listening, any aspiring software engineers or someone who's interested in getting involved in artificial intelligence, you're more than welcome to pop me an email and get in touch with me. We'd love to have you involved and contribute to this mission that we have at Braintree.
Grab this opportunity to network with Vedanta. She is amazing. We have another question in the chat. What should I study in varsity to get into AI?
Okay, so it depends, right? What do you want to do? If you want to be able to create AI, I would definitely say do software or engineering or something to do with um, data science. I think that's a very important one. You need to understand data in order to know about AI. So definitely learn how to code. I think everyone should learn how to code, whether you want to get into AI or not. You should have some level of understanding. Um, but to be honest, it's not so important what you study in university, but how you apply it. So you can be a biomedical scientist and get into AI eventually. So my advice would be to make sure you make decisions based on what's good for you in the moment, but have the flexibility to change that plan. If it doesn't work out the way you anticipate.
Yeah, very important that it's not very important what you study, because in the AI field we need a diverse range of voices and knowledge and skills, because AI is going to take over our lives, and we're going to need the doctors involved, the psychologists. We'll need the creatives as well. So
I
another, yeah. Another comment from Rishal, agree with you on that. The more women we have in AI, the more diverse our technology becomes. We can only fix the biases by creating the technology ourselves. Very true.
I couldn't agree more with that, Rochelle. And you'll be surprised. I did a search on the top researchers in AI ethics, and the top four researchers are female researchers. And at the top of that pile is a lady named Virginia Diggum, and she writes a great article. It hasn't been released yet, but it will be in the next few months, and I'm happy to share it with the women in tech community about the role of women in creating AI and creating technology in the future. And she makes this really interesting parallel where um, women have been used, for the voice of Siri, and because we are amicable and we are easy to get along with. But she says that what you don't realize is that we are a formidable force creating the future, and the only way we can create the future is if we all learn how to code and we all learn how to create the future around us. So, Rochelle, you are absolutely on top of things when it comes to the role of women in that.
Yes, thank you for that, Tushal. Um, Teko says, thanks for your answer. Another question: what are your thoughts around some people possibly being left behind in poorer communities because of how quickly technology is advancing?
Teko, that is exactly the problem that we are tackling in my PhD project. Um, this could go either way. We are at a crossroads when it comes to AI technology right now. It could either lead to us having access to giving access to healthcare to the poorest of the poor people, to the most marginalized people. They could use a cell phone and they would be able to chat to the world's leading specialist halfway across the world. That can only happen if there are regulations in place, if it's not just the health department or one ministerial department working on this. It's got to be something that happens at an international scale. Multiple sectors need to be involved, and the only way that can happen is if people begin to engage collaboratively in this conversation and not just leave it to chance. What can easily happen is IBM will be here tomorrow rolling out a new technology, and it will only be 1% of the country that has access to that technology. However, if you have a regulation in place that says in order for IBM to enter the market, they've also got to include a market that cannot afford the technology in some way, whether that is through capacity development or digital competency training. There's got to be a regulation that safeguards against the exclusion of the poorest of the poor.
I love that, Vedanta. That is something so important to think about.
Yeah, that's going to be the defining factor, and it's going to change the way we live for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
So if we don't have the gatekeepers in place, it's very likely that we will further widen the economic disparity in the country.
Yeah. And this is one of Women in Tech's aims as well, social inclusion, because what we found was during the pandemic, when kids had to move their education online, kids in poorer communities were sort of being left behind, right? Because they don't have access to computers or smartphones. And so this is why we partner with companies to get those donations of computers and try and spread it out as far as we can.
Absolutely. I mean, we live in a country where infrastructure is incredibly unstable at the moment. I mean, I'm talking of electricity. I'm talking about internet supply. But these things have to be addressed first before we can even attempt to roll out AI in the country. So projects like mine and others that are being conducted by really good South African researchers, I'm happy to say that we are in very good hands. The University of KwaZulu-Natal was awarded a great grant in order to look at these issues, and I think we are starting to talk about them. The time is running out, so I will say to Teko that we need to really address these issues swiftly.
Yeah, I agree. So, Vedanta, this is an interesting conversation, and we could probably brainstorm solutions the entire evening, which we should probably do
We
as
should,
well.
yeah, we
Yeah.
should actually.
A comment from Rishal, I love that. It's not what you study at university, but how you apply it. So, Vedanta, let's move on to something a bit lighter. Tell us, what's your favorite quote? What's something that you keep at the back of your mind as you go about your life's journey?
Interesting. It's not so much a quote. There's a few quotes actually, but um, it's more a thought, and it is that an oyster, takes some oysters take 60 years to develop one pearl, and it's every single year it's a millimeter of calcium deposited around that pearl, and the year will pass, and then it'll be another millimeter. And so the thing that I've tried to take from that, is that everything takes time, and it's not a race. It's not something that should be done overnight, or it wouldn't be worthwhile pursuing, right? So I've been trying to recognize that there is great virtue in patience, and I never thought of it like that before. So it
Yeah.
takes 60 years for an oyster to develop a pearl, and it's when it's done, it's one of the most valuable commodities on earth. So be patient, and keep developing your life's work. Keep developing your pearl 1 millimeter at a time.
That's excellent advice. I mean, especially in the tech world, there's so many different, sections that you can learn, so many different subjects, but you can't do everything all at once. So you need to
Yeah,
just have patience with yourself, right? You can't sign up
absolutely.
for all the Udemy courses.
Exactly.
You take it one course at a time. Yeah,
Oh,
thank
that's
you
so
for
true. Yeah.
yeah. And another question that I love asking people is, you know, there's always that one piece of advice that you were giving that was just a light bulb moment for you.
Hmm.
Did you ever have something like that? And would you like to share it with us?
Okay, so there have been so many inspiring people that I've met, and so many people supporting me along this journey. The best advice I received was, um, even if you don't know everything, you know something. So you always have something to contribute to the discussion. And I think that was very important for me as I was studying and as I was going to international conferences and meeting people like Anthony Fauci. I mean, there was no way that I could have a lengthy conversation with him about the immune response, or anything of that matter, but I had something to contribute. And that's the advice that really sort of made me feel incredibly settled in myself, is that I may not have all the answers, but I can certainly apply my mind and help and contribute to something, no matter how small that contribution is.
That's excellent. And it's so important for us women to also remember that because, we have this imposter syndrome and we're always doubting ourselves. But you don't know everything, but you do know something. I love that.
Everyone knows something, and I think we especially in academia, we often marginalize people who aren't able to articulate what they know
Yes.
easily, and I think that is something I hope to be a part of, that to change that as well, is that we need to recognize that there are various and diverse forms of contribution out there, and we need to take heed of these, or we are missing out on massive opportunities.
Vedanta, you've opened up my mind today to so many topics. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to go back and reflect on myself. So, Vedanta, thank you for taking the time to chat to us and share your Woman in Tech story. I personally love learning from stories, and that is what our network is all about, sharing knowledge and helping each other grow.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's such a great network to be a part of, and to have um, I guess to have an understanding that you're not in it alone, and that there are people who are very similar to you and come from very similar places that you came from, and that there is definitely a way to learn from one another, support one another, and if need be, to give each other the push to be brave and to take our voices into consideration going forward.
Thank you, Vedanta. I'd also like to thank our backstage support, Teko. She did an amazing job. And then thank you to everyone who attended. And before you leave, please save those links as well as my email address and feel free to reach out if you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to donate. If you just like some support from Women in Tech, that's what our network is here for. And Vedanta, I will get those links from you or any of the resources that you mentioned, and we'll post that on our social media pages for all of our followers. Just some comments from the chat. We have Monica who says, "Thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and for being so kind."
It's such a pleasure.
So,
That's the best compliment someone can get. Thank
yes,
you.
for being so kind, right?
Yeah, for being so kind. Yeah, that's very, very sweet. Thank
Thank you
you.
everyone for attending and have a great weekend.
Thank
Bye.
you, Rosanna. Thanks, everyone. Bye.